What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Hang on a second. There we are. Sorry about that. Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, April 19th, 2017. Happy Hump Day, and also Happy Patriots Day. And April 19th is significant for a large number of reasons. First of all, it's called Patriots Day because it's the anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which was the first actual military engagements of the American Revolution. And the British got their clocks cleaned, to put it delicately. And that was the start of the revolution to free us from the tyranny of the Bank of England. Now, it's also, sadly, the anniversary of the U.S. government's final assault on the religious commune of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, during which the U.S. government gassed its own people with a chemical weapon that is banned for use in combat. Gassed a church full of women and children to death. After all the wailing about supposedly Assad gassing his own people, and then we have to remember our government actually provably did it. So that's a tragedy. And we put up one of our articles about Waco on the website showing the evidence of who started the shooting. And it turns out the BATF just opened fire. When Koresh opened the door, he knew the BATF raid was on the way. One of the reporters had called him. And Koresh knew there wasn't anything illegal. The church commune funded itself by buying and repairing and reselling used guns. This being Texas, everybody has guns. And a lot of people might scratch their heads about trading in firearms, but look at all the churches that traded in alcohol, for example. So Koresh knew he was okay. He was actually friends with the BATF agents. And just 9 days before the raid, the BATF agents invited David Koresh to go shooting with them. And Koresh supplied the ammunition, and the BATF allowed Koresh to try out their weapons. They were all friends. The raid was a PR stunt because the BATF was facing serious criticism for a whole series of botched raids where innocent people had been killed. And they botched this one, and the government said, well, we can't have this, so we're going to go on in, flatten the place, absolutely destroy it, and then we can make up whatever lies we want about them. They were dealing in automatic weapons. They were planning terror attacks. David Koresh was a child molester. It's become a recognized pattern. And, of course, today is also the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, which was blamed on Timothy McVeigh, and supposedly he parked a truck full of AMFO explosive in front of the building. And by the way, as a federal building, it is built to resist bomb damage. And they said he had a whole truck full of this stuff, and it went off. And military experts said that truck could not damage that building. And the amount of AMFO in the truck kept growing in the corporate media reports. Did we say it was 1,000 pounds? It was 4,000 pounds. It was 12. He had a portable black hole in there, and he fit in several tons of explosive. And that's why it all came on down. And then there were audio recordings that revealed the sounds of cutter charges inside the building. And the story was just absurd on the face of it. The reports at the scene were saying there were additional bombs that were found in the building and defused. And then there was the mystery of the second Ryder truck on a U.S. military base. Now, conveniently for the BATF, Congress had called for hearings into what happened at Waco, and the BATF had just decided to collect together all the evidence and all the paperwork and just, for the time being, store it in the Oklahoma City Federal Building, the Murrah Federal Building. And so along comes Tim McVeigh, and the building is blown up, and it's horrific. And golly gee, I'm sorry, all the evidence about what happened in Waco is gone. You can have your hearings, but really, we don't have anything to bring you. How very lucky for the BATF. And then there was the story of the BATF's chief expert on truck bombs, which a whole month before the Oklahoma City bombing, he was out in Arizona building and detonating truck bombs, supposedly as research on how to deal with truck bombs. And he just happened to be in Oklahoma City on the day the explosion happened, called it on in. I mean, we've come to recognize at this age the classic pattern of a U.S. government false flag. All right, moving on to the war zones here. We were kind of hoping maybe the U.S. was going to back off on North Korea, but whoever is really calling the shots for the U.S. government is out there still putting pedal to the metal. It was a little embarrassing about how all last week we were hearing the Carl Vinson is off the coast of North Korea. It's being joined by the Ronald Reagan. It's being joined by the Nimitz. And it turned out military personnel were denying any participation by the Reagan or the Nimitz. And the Carl Vinson turned out to be down in Indonesia. Well, not to worry. It is now on its way to Korea. And it may stay there a while. Now, actually, that area of the West Pacific is the Carl Vinson's normal patrol area. And they're heading to Korea to participate in a major military exercise with Japan and South Korea. But they're rattling the sabers very, very hard on this. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Vice President Mike Pence is out there talking tough. He's talking about the sword is ready. And he's out there saying, we will defeat any attack, which is kind of weird because looking over the last 16 years, it's the U.S. and its allies doing all the attacking. I challenge anybody to show me on a map of the United States of America where North Korea has attacked us, or for that matter, Syria, or Iraq, or Iran, or Libya, or Yemen, or Sudan, or Somalia. The U.S. is the aggressor. We're the ones doing the attacking. Pence is also saying the United States refuses to negotiate directly with North Korea. There will be no talks. And he said the only thing we need to hear from North Korea is that they are ending and ultimately dismantling their nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program. Because how dare they try and build weapons to deter our eventual invasion? They're not allowed to do that under the rules we just made up. And so the attitude that is being struck by Mike Pence is simply, there's no argument. You do what we, the United States, tells you to do, or bad things are going to happen to you. Sounds more like the mafia than the government. Now, there's a lot of tough talk going on. There was talk last week about how if North Korea dares to test any more missiles, the United States is simply going to shoot them down. World's most expensive shooting gallery. However, physicist David Wright, who's been looking very closely at the U.S. ballistic missile defense system, $80 billion worth of work. And this guy is also co-director of the Global Security Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, is saying that the ballistic missile defense system is up to the same high standards of quality we've seen in the F-22, the F-35, the Gerald R. Ford, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships. In other words, this physicist is saying we're not going to be able to shoot down North Korean missiles. The only time these ballistic missile defense systems have been tested, it's always against a target that is following a pre-planned, pre-announced trajectory, and very often they have homing beacons on them, which is a courtesy I rather doubt a real enemy is going to afford us. So what's going on in North Korea? Why the rattling of sabers in North Korea? Well, possible backdoor to China, although China has come down on the side of getting North Korea to calm down. But the U.S. has been making stink face at North Korea for decades, 67 years in fact. Because North Korea is a reminder of one of the wars the United States failed to win. But it turns out there's another reason why there's this sudden rush to war in North Korea. Now remember we were talking about the link between Afghanistan and opium, where the Taliban had eradicated opium production inside Turkey. And the U.S. invades, and the poppies are blooming all over the place. There are bumper crops, and huge amounts of cheap heroin are flowing to American drug lords to sell to your children. Well, early on in his administration, Kim Jong-un shut down opium production inside North Korea. But all of a sudden, because it is a cash crop and it brings in a lot of money. And North Korea needs the money with all these sanctions and embargoes going on. The North Korean drug trade is back in business. They're a huge opium producer just like Afghanistan. There's only one problem. North Korea's opium is not under the control of the CIA. It's a competitor, and competition drives down prices and profits. So that's what's really going on here. North Korea is daring to cut in on our action. How dare they come on in and cut into our territory, our turf. It's our turf. The opium is our turf. Got to send the buttonmen to rub them out. More indications we don't have a government. We have organized crime inside Washington, D.C. Now, over in Syria, near Aleppo, there's been a horrible tragedy. Over 60 children have been killed as a bus convoy of evacuees was bombed. And basically, the strategy of the U.S.-backed rebels, they don't want civilians to evacuate because that way, anytime there's an attack by Russia or Syria, they can wave the dead civilians and say, oh, look what's happening. Look, this is all Assad's fault. But obviously, it wasn't Assad who bombed this convoy of evacuees. They can't frame him for it. And so don't expect Donald Trump to start crying about these particular dead babies, because the only dead babies he's going to cry about are the ones that further the war agenda. Now, the body count is very high on this bombing attack because apparently before the actual bombing, the children were lured out of the buses with snacks. So over 100 people dead, 60 children, a lot more injured. Despite this, the Syria evacuations have resumed. Now, Russia is scratching their head about a possible coming investigation into the claim that Assad gassed his own people in Idlib. And there are basically two OPCW probes. Both are being run by British citizens. And you know, Great Britain is on board with the agenda to bomb Syria and invade Syria. And so Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is saying it seems a rather odd coincidence to have just British people in charge of these coming investigations. It runs contrary to the principles of a supposed international organization. Well, Lavrov need not worry, because I don't care what OPCW says. We've seen so many of these compromised investigations, like the one to Malaysian Airlines shoot down. And this whole Assad gassed his own people story is utter nonsense on the face of it. I don't need OPCW to tell me anything. I don't care what they say. I already know the story was a lie. I'm a big boy. I can figure these things out for myself, and so can you. We're going to take a phone call now. Steve, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there?
Oh.
There you go.
I am here.
Okay.
I'm here. No, a comment and a question. With the North Korea situation, you know, somebody from North Korea needs to point out the reason why they want to have it as a deterrent, the nuclear weapon. As you always said, they always want it for deterrent, to make sure they're not invaded, and point the finger at the United States, turn it around and say, look at all your nation building and all your invasion of all these other little countries on false pretenses and lies. So we are going to protect ourselves to make sure we are not invaded, and that's why we want one not to use to deter people like you, countries like you, from invading us.
North Korea is already saying that.
Question,
North Korea is already saying that. If you tune in to the Voice of Korea, they broadcast on shortwave in English. You can pick it up on your shortwave radio. You can get the frequencies online at these various shortwave DXing websites. And that's exactly what they're saying. We need these weapons to deter another invasion of North Korea by the United States. They remember that First Korean War. But, of course, nobody in the Western media or the government is going to acknowledge that this is the reason, this is the justification for weapons. It's always, oh, they're building these weapons so they can use them on us. And, again, absurd on the face of it. if anybody used a nuclear weapon on the United States, the end result would be that country melted down to a pool of radioactive glowing green glass. And so, again, if you think about all of this stuff all the way through, you begin to see through the lies.
Right. Okay, my economics question for you. I was listening to some talk radio and driving around town today, and I heard somebody supposedly claims to be an economics professor claiming that, and let me tell you the scenario here. He was talking about China and debt and being the holder of U.S. debt. He said that quite often the country that is indebted to the other country has greater power and leverage over the one who holds the debt. So that's my question to you. Do you think that's possible, true? And he was pointing to China because he said China's economy is in a tailspin right now. So actually the United States being indebted to China and China holding all the notes on the U.S., that we have greater leverage on China right now.
No, that's really rather absurd. Of course, you have to remember what Harry Truman used to say about economists. If you lay them all end to end, they still point in different directions. But the idea is that China has the leverage because they can call in the various loans and notes, those that are on a rollover situation. They can start dumping treasuries, which they've already started to do, and that depresses the value of the dollar. I think, to be very honest, it's ridiculous to claim that the indebted person has any kind of control or leverage over those who hold the debt. I mean, think about your local bank and your credit card bill. Does the fact that you owe them money give you any kind of leverage over them, or is it working the other way?
All right. Okay, well, one last question on that is that, I think I just let it slip my mind. I'll think about it some other time. I'll call you tomorrow.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the news. Russia is continuing to stand firmly behind Assad and is continuing to say to the world, this story that Assad gassed his own people is as big a lie now as it was in 2013 and 2014. And apparently Russia is supplying additional weapons and capability to Syria and is now allowing Syrian warplanes to use Russian airfields. So the thing is starting to escalate. Probably Russia understands following the cruise missile attack by the United States, Syria's forces, assets rather, need to be dispersed. And by the way, all this talk about decapitation strike on North Korea's nuclear weapons, by now I'm sure they're all crated up and they're being sent to hidden locations all over the country. They're not going to be in one place for the convenience of the American bombers to destroy here. But let's recap on the whole Syria situation right now. Bashar al-Assad was winning on all fronts, including diplomatic. He had all but beaten the U.S.-backed rebels. Peace talks were about to start that would allow him to run for re-election, and even the White House stated they were ready to accept the continued presidency of Bashar al-Assad. So somebody out there tell me why Assad would do the one thing that would cross a red line and reverse his fortunes using a banned chemical weapon on civilians instead of the rebels. In a militarily insignificant target, he has absolutely nothing to gain. It is the rebels and the U.S. war hawks who gain. That's where we are. That's why the story never made sense from the beginning. And I don't care how many OPCW experts come on out and say, we've got the evidence. France is now saying they've got the evidence that Assad gassed his own people. They're going to just pilot all this stuff and say, see, but look at how much evidence we've been presented that turned out to be lies. The Niger yellow cake document was a forgery. The laptop of death was a fake. The motto of all of these war hawks continues to be, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. More news about Syria and the other war zones, and there are way too many of them. Let's admit it, we are in World War III right now, and we better start adjusting to that reality. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, a little while ago, the U.S. bombed a mosque in Syria, saying that there was an al-Qaeda meeting going on inside, and as it turned out, it was basically Muslims at prayer, and they killed a lot of civilians. But no big deal when the U.S. is killing civilians, but by golly, when Assad is killing civilians, that's a horrible thing. Well, Human Rights Watch has issued a report basically saying the U.S. is just not taking any kind of precautions to avoid killing civilians. It's just not an issue for them. And they're absolutely right here. And interestingly enough, a little aside, earlier today I saw this video, was on Fox News, where apparently Dianne Feinstein was addressing an auditorium and started talking about Assad gassing his own people, and the room erupted in laughter, boos, jeers, name-calling at her, and boy, it was a joy to watch Feinstein's face as she's up there and saying, let's take the name-calling out of this. And because, what's she going to do? Try and raise on a busted flush? Nobody believes this story. Anybody who's supporting the Assad gassed his own people story, they're pushing some kind of a pro-war agenda, or whoever signs their paycheck is telling them that's what they have to say today. Meanwhile, over in Great Britain, Boris Johnson is hinting that he may ignore the recent Parliament vote against involvement in Syria at a U.S. request. Johnson has said, it would be really, really hard for us to refuse a request from Washington, D.C., and what the British people want and what Parliament voted for, really, it's not a factor anymore. The U.S. says go kill Syria, and we're just going to have to go kill Syria. So, Boris, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers. Watch your head climbing into that transport, and we will call Assad and tell him you are on your way to Syria to kick his butt all by yourself. But the rest of us, we're going to sit this one out. Because we have been down this road way too many times. Now, there is still unconfirmed rumor going around that the ISIS leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, has been captured in northern Syria. And everybody's mum about this. Pentagon spokesman Major Adrian Rankin Galloway said they have no information, and the Russian Defense Ministry has not commented on the issue. But if they do have him, and they can get him to admit being supported by the United States, which we already have considerable evidence, that's going to really damage the official story here. Now, we put up a YouTube video on whatreallyhappened.com, and it was taken during Matisse's flight to Saudi Arabia. And the defense secretary was out there saying, we're going to Saudi Arabia to discuss our mutual security. And he covered a bunch of topics. And basically, the key points he made was North Korea is bad, Russia is bad, and your kids are going to be sent into Yemen to teach those bad Yemenis not to refuse a U.S. puppet ruler. And we're seeing another story that came out of Counterpunch. U.S. moves toward major intervention in Yemen. Apparently, they just got tired of the fact that Saudi Arabia has not been able to bring the people of Yemen to heel, to love their imposed junta. So they're talking about going into Yemen, and the alarming part is they're trying to link Iran to this. If you look carefully at all these stories about Yemen, you're going to see a lot of ongoing mention about Yemen. A story that came out of one area is that Iranians hacked a Patriot missile battery and used it to shoot down that Black Hawk helicopter, the Saudi helicopter, and killed 20 Saudi officers. It was those Iranians who did it. How dare they kill the people who are killing the people of Yemen. We're going to take another break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're talking about how Saudi Arabia has failed to get Yemen to accept its U.S.-imposed puppet rulers, what the corporate media calls the internationally approved government, which is a bit of a lie in and of itself, because governments are chosen by the people of that country. That's what democracy is all about. This idea that other countries get to pick your government, that's what happens in a war, which is what we've got here now. But there's a very clear effort to try and link this all to Iran. And there was another article, this came out in Fort Russ. Yemen launches Iranian-made missiles into Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi Arabia is bombing Yemen. Of course, they're going to fight back by shooting missiles into Saudi Arabia. That's just common sense. That's what happens in war. But they're making the point. These are Iranian-made missiles. They're Iranian. And by the way, the photo that of the Iranian missiles in the article is obviously photoshopped. It's actually a very poor quality job. Now, Donald Trump has basically told Congress that as far as he can tell, now he was questioning that Iranian nuclear deal during the campaign, but he's told Congress Iran is complying with the nuclear deal, which is true. All the international inspectors have confirmed that. They have not been able to find any case where Iran is not complying with the deal. The only one not complying with the deal is the United States that has not lifted the sanctions. Now, Tillerson is out there saying, well, Iran may be complying with the nuclear deal, but we should keep the sanctions in place because Iran sponsors terrorism. Tillerson went on to say, Iran aided Iraq against us. Iran hates Israel. Well, the P5+1 deal was basically Iran gets rid of its nuclear program, and the U.S. lifts the sanctions. There was nothing in the P5+1 deal about state sponsor of terror, which, by the way, nobody can prove in the case of Iran, or Iran aided Iraq, or Iran hates Israel. It's actually the other way around in that one. So basically what we have is the United States government has just broken another agreement, which sends a message to the rest of the world, you cannot make a deal with the United States. They will not keep their promises. Okay. Now then, getting on over to Turkey. Yesterday on the radio show, I said there had to be massive election fraud for Erdogan to win that referendum that basically got rid of the parliamentary democracy and essentially made him sultan. And I said there had to be massive vote fraud because ordinary people don't vote away democracy. It just doesn't happen. And we already heard that there was something like 1.5 million ballots that were not legal. Because under Turkish law, the ballots have to be in a specific envelope that's provided with the ballot, and it has to have a specific stamp on it to verify it is legitimate. And apparently the senior election official in Turkey just said, well, we're going to go ahead and take those 1.5 million votes anyway. And remember, Erdogan won his referendum by a very slim margin, just about 1%. Now, international observers monitoring the Turkish election are saying that they're aware that at least 2.5 million Turkish votes were manipulated. So when you add that to the 1.5 million, you're looking at 4 million fraudulent votes for Erdogan to steal the people's democracy and parliamentary control. So we have a new tyrant out there in the Middle East. But he's our tyrant, and that makes it okay. Look at all the times they've accused Assad of being a cruel dictator. No, he isn't. He's won his presidency in honest elections. International observers looked at the elections and said, these are on the up and up. Remember last year's election in November? They didn't allow international observers to come in and look. So the people who were opposed to Erdogan becoming a sultan are saying the election has to be called into account, and they're alleging massive election fraud. And so we're seeing this interesting article out here, Blacklisted News, fraud allegations to test Turkish President Erdogan's new authoritarian power. And we're already hearing where Erdogan supporters are hunting down opponents to the referendum, and they're physically assaulting him. He's turned into another Hitler. We're seeing the brown shirt tactics fully on display over there. Now then, some Russian warships sailed through the English Channel on their way to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the center of the English Channel is international space. All nations have a right of passage. And the British Royal Navy sent out a frigate that escorted these 4 Russian ships. And the media is trying to make a big deal about, oh, the Russian warships, they're in the English Channel. Oh, it's horrible. They're threatening us. It's a horrible thing. And they're also making a big deal that for the second day in a row, Russian bombers have been flying off of Alaska on their patrols here. And they're in international airspace. But the U.S. says they're in our enemy identification zone, or whatever the fancy name they have for it is. Take a look at a globe, not a flat Mercator map, but a globe. Google Earth will do. Look how close Russia is to Alaska. It's kind of hard for the Russian planes to be flying around that part of their country without being close to Alaska. I mean, after all, Sarah Palin can see Russia from her porch, I think. But everybody's concerned about just how dangerously close we are to a new world war. Article out of RIMF.com. Washington pushes the world to brink of nuclear war. And nobody's being fooled by the propaganda. They know the problem is not North Korea or Syria or Iran or Libya or Yemen. Look at the last 16 years of unending interventions into other countries, and you know who the aggressor is. I mean, we have kids just now getting ready to go to high school who've never lived in a time of peace. It's always been a war someplace. In fact, looking at the whole history of the United States of America, it's hard to find a year here and there where we weren't at war with somebody somewhere. And they were all started with lies, frauds, and deception. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. Trust us, the Lusitania wasn't smuggling weapons to Great Britain. Pearl Harbor was a complete surprise. We had no idea it was coming. Saddam has nuclear weapons. Assad has sarin gas. Vladimir Putin has a Death Star. Lavrov is out there saying that the U.S. is spreading chaos. Russia's trying to put out the fires. And it just goes on and on and on. And the way he puts it, he says he wakes up and then learns about some new stupid thing that Washington has done. Then he gets on the phone to try and begin the adult supervision. And that's true. Putin and Lavrov are the only adults in the room. Everybody else is acting like a spoiled child. Story coming out of the Daily Mail in the UK. Russian media claim its military is now capable of neutralizing U.S. warships with electronic jamming devices. Oh, be afraid, accept higher taxes so we can meet the new threat. And, of course, we already know this because of what that one Russian electronic warfare plane did to the USS Donald Cook. They paralyzed it. They flew simulated attack runs against that ship 12 times, and all 12 times, all of the defensive systems on the Aegis ship shut down. And it underscores something that I've been saying for quite a long time. Modern American warships are too dependent on their active defensive systems. And they're very fragile. I think that was illustrated when the U.S. Navy made a mistake with their own drone, and it crashed through the housing on the spy radar on one of the Aegis ships and destroyed $30 million worth of computers. Those things are as fragile as a Christmas tree ornament. It's beginning to look more and more like America's weapons are theater props in a giant game of bluff. And yes, they work well enough when you're fighting against an enemy that doesn't really have much of a military to begin with. But going on up against another major power like Russia and China, I think we are in trouble. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Alan in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to talk about a couple other topics that are kind of getting pushed to the back that are pretty important out there. First of all, I don't know if you know Larry Klayman from Freedom Watch is trying to get Obama indicted with a couple of, trying to serve him with a couple of subpoenas.
Oh, is that why Obama is out there traveling all around the world?
I guess he's been in Tahiti, for over a month now. And
no, he wasn't. He wasn't. He's been a lot of places. He was in Scotland, and apparently he's now down. I guess last word he's on somebody's yacht or sailing around the Caribbean.
Yeah, it just looks kind of, I guess they've been trying to call and get him served, and they're just kind of avoiding it. I think this little Obama spike is kind of getting pushed to the back burner, with all the bombings going on and stuff.
Yeah.
And then also, did you hear about Candace Claiborne?
No, I did not.
Obama. Well, she was one of Obama's and Hillary's State Department aides, and she just got indicted for treason.
Oh, yes, I had heard about it. I didn't recognize the name, but yeah, she's looking at serious jail time. I hope she makes a deal. Of course, if she makes a deal, she could wind up in Fort Marcy Park.
If she can stay alive long enough. And then the other one that was getting kind of pushed to the back that's really big, I think, right now is, two of Trey Gowdy's congressional investigators went missing. They were investigating... That story's a hoax. That story is a hoax. It tracks back to a website that's putting out nonsense to try and discredit the independent media. Oh, okay. Well, I heard it in a couple of sources, so I was just getting your opinion on that one.
Yeah, that one's a hoax. Just think about it for a minute. If two of Trey Gowdy's investigators had vanished, Trey Gowdy would be on the news right now saying this happened.
Right. Well, with today's media, you just never know if they would hide something like that. But, okay, I just wanted to let you know about those couple of stories and see what you thought about them.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. Alan, we're going to let you go and switch over to Fred in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello, Fred. Are you there? Fred dropped. All right, we're going to go to Mo in Florida. Mo, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mo, are you there? We seem to be having some problems with our phone system today. Mo, are you there?
Michael, did you say, yeah, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you now. What's on your mind?
There was something going on with your phones, I think. But I don't know if you're aware of this, but this whole crony capitalism stuff, like Biden's son in the Ukraine and all that. But did you know that George Soros had a $250 million loan to Cadre and Company that was owned by Jared and his brother, and also, I don't know if this is true, I had a chance to check this one out, but he's Kirshner, the little, whoever he thinks he is, thinks he's a big shot, whoever he is, who's got the president's ear, senior staff. He's using the same ad agency as the Clintons did. What? This is just in your face, if that's true. I know the first part. I know George Soros pretty sure he loaned Kirshner money for his failing deals. And, Soros doesn't do anything without a reason. We know what his reasons are.
Yeah, he's not interested in the returns here. Well, the interesting thing is, according to Forbes magazine, the Kushner family's net worth is $1.8 billion with a B dollars. But apparently, at one point, they had that venture capital investment companies in Slack. Apparently, Jared paid a huge amount of money for 666 Fifth Avenue in 2007. Then he got into trouble and almost had it foreclosed on. And that may have been where some politically influential people bailed him out in order to put a leash on him.
Yeah, I think that's just so obvious. It's just right in your face. But The other thing I was just nothing in particular question, but it's just amazing to me that we don't have anybody, being indicted. I'm talking about Rice. I'm talking about Clinton. None of these people. There's got to be a time here when, if Trump backs off on this, and none of these people like Clinton or Rice go to jail, or Comey even, then the thing's a scam. You just know he's been compromised, or it's a scam. Because every one of his rallies, and I know, because I campaigned for him, and I'll tell you this, that was a big deal. People want to see crooks punished. And
yes.
If he doesn't do that,
if
he doesn't do that, the party's over, Mike.
I absolutely agree. Trump is an incredible disappointment for whatever reason. I don't even care why it came about. He has betrayed the voters and supporters like you who put him into office. But again, I don't think it's Trump himself. I think it is just an artifact of our corrupted system, where there isn't anybody who could walk into that Oval Office and really change much of anything. We're going to have to wait for the entire system to come crashing down like the Soviet Union did, and I think it might happen fairly soon as well. So we need to be prepared for that as well.
So why don't he go on TV and explain this? Why don't he do it? Why don't you just go on TV and explain to the American public what's going on? Be a Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler didn't have the internet or TV. So he's going to die. Isn't your country worth dying for?
Well, it might not be just Donald Trump who's being threatened. They may have threatened all of his family and his relatives. And if there's one thing Trump knows the U.S. can do, it's kill people. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Mo. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go with Fred in Wisconsin, who finally called back on in. And, Fred, what is on your mind?
I just looked at rents.com. They've got an interesting article by a guy named Yoshiki Shimatsu, and apparently he's got this story about the U.S. Navy aims to sink its radioactive warships off of Korea, either by letting the Koreans go at it or by some other means. But this way, and this is involving the Reagan, the George Washington, and the Carl Vincennes. So I guess these ships are radioactive from the Fukushima mess, and there's a lot of sailors that are sick, and apparently this would be a perfect way to bring us into World War III by putting our fleet down into the deep trench.
That's a new Pearl Harbor, and I'm looking at the article now, and it does make sense. I'm not really remembering. I thought there was only one carrier that supported the Fukushima rescue efforts, and it is still...
The carrier was San Diego. I have friends out there that told me that they had it at the end of a pier with guards and nobody getting near it. So you're right about that. There was one, but apparently, if you read on, one of them was in an area where it picked up some contamination. But it's an amazing article. I hope this guy's wrong. I just wanted to pass it along to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Obviously, at this point, the U.S. government needs a spectacular false flag to move the war agenda along, because they've lost the support of the American people. And they're going to have to try and make us afraid somehow. And the propaganda is ramping up. We were talking yesterday about how the Department of Homeland Security is saying there are Islamic terrorists active in all 50 states. And apparently the other one now, and even Fox News carried this morning, where the American people are saying we're not concerned that North Korea has missiles. They keep blowing up, and even when they work, they can't reach the U.S. So the propagandists have upped the ante with this claim that North Korea has sleeper agents already inside the United States of America with biological weapons. So forget about the nukes. They've got germs. They've got germs. Get the Lysol. We're under attack. And again, each new lie only erodes their credibility that much faster. We're going to go back to the phones here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, it was Ronald Reagan that was there, by the way. That was the one carrier. And the people sued off to Ronald Reagan, and the Navy came out and said they had no knowledge that there was a dangerous situation. But this is a carrier with a couple nuclear reactors on board filled with nuclear engineers, and they monitor that stuff like intensely, and so it was a complete lie. But yeah, they were totally irradiated back in 2011. But that's not the reason why I was calling, Mike. I noticed an article that out of the New York Times that said that Sheldon Adelson ponied up $5 million and virtually paid for Trump's inauguration. Then I read another article where Susan Rice, her net worth is $50 million on $172,000 a year. Can I hold her?
Yeah, hold. We'll bring you back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2, and we're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, just pick up where you left off.
Well, it also came out, I think there's an article on RBN talking about how Susan Rice on $172,000 a year salary amassed a $50 million fortune.
Yeah.
Then we have Jared Kushner, who is, of course, subverting virtually everything going on in the White House, who's funded all the settlers in the West Bank for, giving them tons of money. Goldman Sachs and all that, he's allowed to help take over, the Trump administration. Then George Soros, you know what he's doing and who he's funded by and what his sympathies are. Then there's Haim Saban, who was next to George Soros, was the biggest funder of the Democratic Party. And, where does all this point, Mike?
Well, it points to the money powers in control of our nation. We have oligarchs in this country, the same way the Soviet Union did, and they're calling all the shots. And it is another reminder that, when individuals get too much money, they tend to do bad things. And they start to act like they're in charge of the government, and they're not supposed to be. The people are supposed to ultimately have the final say what wars we go into. And the reality is that we, the people, are not getting the government we vote for or pay for. It's a raw deal. We're voting in rigged elections, and we're paying for a government that's designed to serve the oligarchs.
Well, Mike, I'll tell you, I follow this stuff pretty closely, as you know, and I know you do. But you got to go a ways. You go past the Koch brothers. It's tough to find oligarchs that are as prominent as the ones that come out of the neocon Israeli firster mob. It's tough to find any as big, or there certainly aren't as many. So I just wanted to make that point.
Well, it's a valid point to make. What can I tell you? Anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks, man.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a call from Keith in Montana, and then we're going to close the line so I can get some of this other news done. Keith, what's on your mind?
Mike, did you get that email I sent you earlier about James Lilly?
I'm not sure. I don't remember it.
Well, I sent it earlier this morning here. But anyway, I was listening to William Engo, reporter, longtime reporter, and like that. But anyway, he was quoting a few things that I'd never heard before like that, so I thought I would pass it along to you. But in it, he said that if Korea didn't exist, they would have invented it. And
yeah, okay.
And I thought that was I thought that was kind of interesting because of the fact of, and also the fact that he is one of these Yale guys, and I don't know if he's related to Skull and Bone stuff or what, It was just, I just thought it was kind of interesting, as far as that,
Okay, well, I'm not seeing your email here, so you may need to resend it. Things are very flaky on the Internet these days. I think possibly by design here. Yeah, but what we're seeing is, I think Americans are finally waking up and realizing that this country is not run the way the Constitution and the Bill of Rights describes, or how we were taught it was being run when we were in those state-controlled schools. And the whole government has become a big racket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you for the phone call.
Sounds good, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here and get back to the news. Had a little problem there with that phone connection. All righty. Now, do you remember back when that whole situation in Ukraine started to crank on up, the U.S. went on in and staged a coup d'etat to get rid of the elected President Yanukovych because he favored realigning Ukraine with Russia, and the Western interests wanted Ukraine and its resources brought into the European Union, so they had one more country to suck dry to please the European Central Bank, and they put in Poroshenko, at which point Crimea seceded and merged with the Russian republics, and now we have the eastern Ukrainian republics that are trying to break away because they don't want to live in a country with a government that they didn't choose for themselves. And it was during that time where Russia had contracted with France to build these helicopter carrier ships, the Mistrals. And under U.S. pressure, France canceled the deal. Russia had already paid for the ships. They'd already been built. And the U.S. called up France and said, don't deliver them. And France said, yes, massa, yes, massa, yes, massa. And it was a big political stink. And finally, France sold those ships to Egypt. Well, Egypt is now making a deal with Russia to finish fitting out the Mistrals because France built the hulls, the engines, and all the basic ship components, but Russia was going to install its own, obviously superior electronic warfare radar defense systems, and now Egypt is going to be getting those systems from Russia directly. So, just very complicated deal all around. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates, just now rejoining our network. Over at the United Nations, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories, Michael Link, is saying this 50-year occupation has been profoundly corrosive of human rights and democratic values, and I'm sure that Netanyahu is already up there screaming, you're an anti-Semite, you're an anti-Semite, you hate the Jews, you want Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens. But it has been a 50-year occupation. And I wish the representatives at the United Nations had the courage to actually follow the rules here, because Israel's membership in the United Nations is unique in that it had conditions placed on it. And the first condition was a Palestinian right to return to their homes and villages taken from them during the creation of Israel. The second requirement was that if the Palestinians chose not to return, that Israel would financially compensate them for their lost homes and businesses. Israel has not complied with either one of those conditions. Israel should be kicked out of the United Nations. But Israel is a master at corrupting politicians around the world. We've certainly seen it with our own politicians here, and they've corrupted the politicians at the United Nations. This little tiny country wields tremendous influence, and they hold themselves as being above the law. They have nuclear weapons. They will not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They will not allow IAEA inspections. They're always ready to point the fingers at other people. They claimed that Iraq was building nuclear weapons under their power station at Osirak, went in and bombed it. Inspectors looking at the ruins of the power station found, ta-da, a power station. There was no hidden bomb factory under the Iraqi power station the way there is underneath the Dimona reactor inside Israel. And of course, Israel has been screaming that Iran is within 6 months of a nuclear bomb going back to the 1980s. People should stop listening to them. Look at all the liars we have in our corporate media and our government. The ones in Israel are more brazen. And speaking of brazen lies in the corporate media, a story coming out claiming Trump's poll numbers rise for every bomb he drops. And they're citing poll numbers saying Trump's approval is going up. Every time he kills innocent children and blows up useless targets, his poll numbers go on up. And, of course, you need to keep in mind, these are the same polls that told us Hillary Clinton was going to win in a landslide. And you need to remember there are two kinds of polls in use by government and corporate media. There are the internal polls that attempt to honestly assess what people are thinking and feeling. Then there are the so-called external polls. These are the polls that are crafted to be made public, and they're not designed to measure popular opinion. They're designed to manufacture it, relying on the herd instinct of you, the sheeple, to go along with whatever the corporate media tells you everybody else thinks is a really good idea. What they're really hoping is that if you are constantly being told the vast majority of the American people think World War III is a nifty idea, that you'll just shut up and say, oh, all right, well, if the rest of America wants it. You need to learn to be your own person. If somebody puts out a poll saying that the best way to deal with the failing pension system is to jump off a building, and 95% of senior citizens agree with that, is that going to compel you to go on up and jump off a tall building? It shouldn't. And over in the government and the media, they're feeling the pressure. They are aware they have lost the trust and faith of the American people. And they did it to themselves. The U.S. government has a huge credibility problem of their own making, and I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. So apparently, over at the Department of Homeland Security, John Kelly is apparently just sick and tired of the criticism and has basically come out with a statement saying, shut up, be terrified, and do what you're told. And he's saying if it weren't for us, you would have already been killed by Saddam's nukes and the terrorists and the drug cartels and the rest of it. So, and we're what's keeping you safe. So just shut up about the criticism. Basically what John Kelly is doing, he's standing in the middle of town, whirling his arms around wildly. Somebody comes up and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm keeping the wild elephants away, of course. The other person says, there are no wild elephants within 5,000 miles of here. Kelly says, see, I'm doing a good job. So stop complaining about me blocking traffic by standing in the middle of the street waving my arms around. That's basically what he said. CNN is now out there trying to lay the blame for the Cleveland shooter on video games. Oh, it's all the fault of those video games. We seem to see this every 5 or 6 years. Blame the video games. I still want to know if this Cleveland shooter was on prescription antidepressants, because there is a demonstrable link between these brain-altering medications and senseless acts of violence. Almost all of the mass shooters that the gun grabbers wag at us were either on or withdrawing from these medications. We don't know about the more recent ones because the government has taken to withholding the medical information about the shooter. The shooter has privacy rights. It's privacy rights here. The guy's dead. I don't think he needs to worry about privacy anymore. Well, we're respecting his privacy rights. And we're not going to tell you if he was on these medications. I remember after Sandy Hook, when some people in Connecticut wanted to find out what medications Adam Lanza was on, and the attorney for the medical examiner's office was in the meeting arguing against releasing the information, and he made this ridiculous statement saying, even if in this one case the medication led him to commit these acts of violence, that's not important for people to know because they'll stop taking the medicines prescribed by their doctors. Well, Patrick was wrong because it's not in this one case. If you go over to ssristories.org, there's a lot of them. But Connecticut's economy is very heavily dependent on large pharmaceutical corporations, and that's the real motive there. We can't tell you the products are dangerous. You might decide to stop buying them, and then where would we be? Getting on back to the media. Another story out of Fort Russ talking about the fall of journalism ethics and standards in the corporate press. And yes, we've all been seeing it. Now, when I was in college, as is usual, you're required to take certain courses outside your major. And so I signed up for Journalism 101, got to pretend I was a reporter, and learned the basics of what was considered proper journalism. Multiple sources, confirmation, verify your facts, make sure the spelling is correct. And today, the media is just out there just saying whatever they feel like. And I think a good example of that is the New York Times has gone on the attack against those of us who know that the story that Assad gassed his people is just nonsense. And they can't refute our argument that it just doesn't make any sense here. So they're resorting to insulting anybody who doubts the story. They're trying to mock us. Oh, you silly tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theory kooks. Of course Assad gassed his own people. Yes, we understand we can't figure out a motive for him to do something that stupid, but really, you're just a nutcase, for even daring to doubt the government and the corporate media here. That's not going to get any traction, I think, with the American people. And apparently, the Washington Post has come out with an article looking back at the November election and saying that the only reason Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton is because all the racists got out there and voted. Well, over at the Washington Compost, if any of you are listening here, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are both white. So it really doesn't make any sense. I think for a large part of the American people, like myself, it wasn't so much that they wanted to support Trump. They wanted to prevent Hillary from getting that White House. And yes, as disappointing as Donald Trump is, it would have been worse with Hillary. We would already be seeing the mushroom clouds at this point. Now, Representative Jason Chaffetz, who has been one of the bright lights in terms of trying to investigate all the nefarious activity going on, is apparently deciding to leave politics, or he's been convinced to leave politics. He's not going to seek re-election. And he was one of the major figures on the investigation of Hillary's use of a private email server for official classified government work. And he has been persuaded to leave politics now. It's an ugly system, ugly system. So my nickel, given that the Washington, D.C. itself cannot correct itself, isn't interested in correcting itself. They love things the way they are. It's a sociopath's heaven over there in Sodom on the Potomac. So I am still looking more and more at private citizens who are trying to get the bottom of all this stuff. And Judicial Watch, go Judicial Watch, has filed a complaint with the House Office of Congressional Ethics calling for an investigation into whether Representatives Adam Schiff and Jackie Speer disclosed classified information to the public in violation of House ethics rules. Judicial Watch is also suing the State Department and USAID for records about the funding and political activities of George Soros Open Society Foundation. So go Judicial Watch. If I were an attorney, I would love to work for them, or for Larry Klayman's Freedom Watch. Get out there and shake the trees, as it were. Now, do you remember when it first came on out, the accusation that GCHQ had spied on the Trump campaign and then just handed the information over to U.S. intelligence agencies, Barack Obama, who shared it with the Hillary campaign and everything, and how GCHQ got up and just said, how dare you even suggest such a thing? Of course we would not engage in such an obvious spying on a political campaign here. It's insulting that you even suggest it. Well, when they react with the how dare you defense, it's usually a signal that you're on to something. And apparently, GCHQ is now having to admit, yeah, they were listening to Donald Trump's phone calls and sharing the information back with the Obama administration. Golly gee shuckies, you caught us. And is our face red? We're really embarrassed. We're really, we're really chagrined. No, they aren't. They're ashamed they got caught. People who work in intelligence or politics, they have no shame. It's surgically removed as part of the job requirement. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, remember when all of this started coming on out, that the Obama administration had been spying on Donald Trump and his family and his campaign associates, and they tried to justify it saying, you know, there was this evidence of a Russian connection, that they were talking with Russian intelligence, and they tried to claim it was all legal because they had a FISA warrant. And it's now come on out that the entire case presented to the Foreign Intelligence Service Court by James Comey was that BuzzFeed fake dossier that said Trump and two prostitutes had done weird things in the presidential suite of the Moscow Hotel. And it turned out to be completely bogus. And amazingly enough, most of the corporate media decided the story couldn't be supported, and they ignored it. Even in their efforts to get Trump, they said this is obviously not true. It was written by a former MI5 spy, and somebody paid him to do all of this, and it was just completely discredited. Yet that was the entire case that Comey took to the FISA court to get a warrant from them to make it look like the spying on Donald Trump's campaign was legal and above board. And it wasn't. All righty. Now then, apparently, as you know, there's a runoff election in Georgia, and it almost got thrown to the wrong candidate. And they're now saying that there was a data error from one of the voting cards, and in this case they mean a memory card. And somebody said, this isn't adding up, the checksums aren't there, and they went back and they had to go through hundreds of cards to find the culprit. And once they found the card, they continued the election. But had this gone undetected, it could have handed the election to the wrong person. But it's just a mechanical failure. It's just a goof. It's a glitch, really. I think we need an election system that is designed not to have these glitches, to be completely transparent and verifiable, which I've written up an outline about. We've put it out there. And I've gotten emails from other countries saying, actually, that's how we've been doing our elections. We got rid of those electronic machines. We're looking at massive election fraud in Turkey, massive election fraud here in the United States of America. Our democracy is an illusion. So that no matter what the government does, start World War III, authorize testing of new medicines and drugs on us without our knowledge and permission, which they just got done doing. Somebody complains, they can say, well, you know, you voted for this. What we vote for is always the lesser of two evils. And it's still evil, and it's a stupid way to run a country here. Now, there's a new book out, and it's basically confirming a story we heard earlier, that Hillary Clinton, showing symptoms of her extreme paranoia, was spying on her own staff during the 2008 campaign, especially after she lost. And she was out there to find who had been plotting against her. They're plotting against, my staffers are against me. She was looking for people who were just saying bad things, they're disloyal, or people who've been leaking information. All right, let's talk about the economic news because it's getting wild out there. Trump has issued a trade warning to Canada and is basically saying it's another typical one-sided deal against the United States, and it's not going to be happening for long. And apparently, all of a sudden, Donald Trump is upset with the way trade with Canada is going. And I think that's an artifact of governments getting on in and tinkering and messing with trade. Remember, we're always told about it's a free trade agreement, it's a free trade agreement. Well, if you've got free trade, you don't need an agreement. These agreements are all about forcing other countries to buy things they don't really want, like our GMO agriculture. That was a central feature to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And look what a mess they've made of the economies of the world. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we've got a story that's coming on out now. And it started in The Guardian. And basically, it is now confirmed former CIA Director John Brennan colluded with British and Estonian spies to manufacture a Trump-Russia tie to destroy Trump's candidacy. Now, there's something to think about when you're looking at manufactured fraudulent evidence. If you have real evidence, you don't need to manufacture fraudulent evidence, and in fact, it's dangerous to do so. Because if there's any fraudulent evidence that's uncovered, it discredits everything, including the real facts. So the two are mutually exclusive. If we have confirmation they were manufacturing evidence of a Russia-Trump tie, that tells us there was no Russia-Trump tie, and that's important to keep in mind. I was looking back at that story from the caller about the USS Ronald Reagan, and it was contaminated at Fukushima, and the sailors got sick, and it's basically been hushed up. The media doesn't talk about it. But the story about, remember, the Carl Vinson, and they were talking about the Nimitz and the Reagan sailing to North Korea. Well, the Reagan, it's kind of hard to use right now. If you're on it for too long, you get very, very sick. And they were saying, the article that from rents.com, which we put up at whatreallyhappened.com, is saying that they could just sail it over there and sink it off the coast of North Korea and make our radioactive waste problem their radioactive waste problem, which, of course, is part of the thinking behind depleted uranium munitions, because depleted uranium is a toxic radioactive leftover from building bomb stuff, and it's piling up, and it's part of our nuclear waste problem. So by turning it into ammunition and shooting the rest of the world with it, we're making our radioactive waste problem their radioactive waste problem. And everywhere those depleted uranium munitions are being used, the result is horrific, massive birth defects, not just in the people in those countries, but among our own service people who are exposed to those weapons. Now, thinking about how badly the U.S. needs some kind of a false flag to get Americans back on the war path, it makes sense to me they're going to sail or possibly tow the Ronald Reagan off the coast of North Korea. Then it will be sunk by a U.S. submarine or fired on by a U.S. ship, and they'll claim North Korea staged an unprovoked attack on the Ronald Reagan and sank it with all hands. We must go to war here. Remember the Reagan. Remember the Maine. They claimed that was sunk by a Spanish mine, triggering the Spanish-American War. The captain of the USS Maine, in his report, said the ship was destroyed when an onboard fire touched off the ammunition magazine. And President McKinley and William Randolph Hearst said, obviously the captain doesn't know what he's talking about. It was clearly a Spanish mine, and they were off to war. And then years later, Admiral Hyman G. Rickover, the father of America's nuclear navy, conducted a review of the evidence and came to the conclusion Captain Sigsbee had been correct. There had been an onboard fire. The ammunition magazine had gone off. There was no Spanish mine. All wars are started with lies, fraud, and deception. Can you imagine what would happen if a ruler stands up and says, I think we're going to invade this other country over there. They got a lot of very valuable materials and things that I want, and we're going to send your children over there, and yes, some of them are going to be killed and crippled, but it is a sacrifice I am willing to make. And then you will bring all that wealth back for me and my friends, and we'll all have a really good time. What would be the result? The people would stand up and say, no, we don't want a war. War is dangerous, dirty work. You have to leave your loved ones and travel long distances, and there is a serious risk that you're going to lose important parts of your body. So every president who wants to, every ruler, everywhere in the world who wants to start a war has to commit an act of fraud against their people to make it look like war is their only choice. And we're already hearing Donald Trump out there saying, we have no choice, we have no choice. Yeah, we do. I remember there was an episode on the original Star Trek where the Enterprise was trying to calm a war down here, and And one of the people was saying to Captain Kirk, well, looking at the weapons on your starship, obviously you come from a killer race as well. And he says, yes, we do. But we can decide not to kill. That's all it is. We get up and say, today I am not going to kill anybody. All right, we're going to go back and take a phone call. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, we just haven't heard anything about the unmasking and the spying that the Obama administration committed on Trump. And it's a scam. Why has that gone to the back burner?
Because the more warlike Trump becomes, the more he falls in line with the globalists and the war party. They're now calling up their media assets and say, stop attacking him.
Yeah, they suck. We're done. I mean, I don't see any future in this. Do you see a future for this?
We're going to lose this one. I'm sorry, we are. The conventional wisdom is America's never lost a war. Of course, we lost in Vietnam, and we didn't win in North Korea. And the fact of the matter is, contrary to the movies and TV shows about World War I and World War II, we did not win those all by ourselves. In fact, in both cases, we waited until we could see which side was eventually going to win, and we hopped on the winning side.
Yeah. I heard Julian Assange the other day. He was interviewed by Amy Goodwin of Democracy Now! And one thing that he said about Trump is at least Trump has brought to the forefront the fact that there is a deep state and that basically the president's not in charge of anything.
Yeah, that's now very, very obvious. We're ruled by the oligarchs. We're ruled by the Sheldon Adelsons and the George Soroses and the Bill Gates. Anybody with way, way too much money starts thinking they're a god and should be in charge of the country. Yeah,
it's sad. We have to at least look at that positive side of this, and that's what Julian Assange says. At least that's brought to the forefront, and he was saying he really appreciates it, and so do I.
I'm getting a lot of emails from people saying, yeah, you're right to say it isn't just Donald Trump, it's the system. I don't think Donald Trump was lying all last year on the campaign trail. I think he has been gotten to somehow. Maybe his life has been threatened along with the lives of all of his families. He's been shown the Zapruder film and told, yes, we can kill uncooperative presidents and get away with it. Or there is a rumor, and I stress it is only a rumor, that when Trump was down at Jeff Epstein's little pleasure island in the Caribbean, that he was caught on videotape doing something incredibly icky.
Yeah. Do you think that he actually went down to the island?
Oh, yeah, it's confirmed that he went. He's good friends with Epstein. He's good friends with Epstein.
That's guilt, Mike. That's guilt. What are you doing there?
You're being
Serious.
stupid.
I mean,
you're being stupid to walk into a place like that and not know that it is going to be wired and video cameras all over the place. We all see how tiny video cameras are now. They're incredibly small and hard to find. If you need to, you can buy little devices now that will help you spot a hidden camera. If you travel a lot and you're afraid of somebody trying to compromise you, you should be using one of those. They're not expensive. You can find them on eBay. But it really is. It is a real mess. And anybody who's been to Epstein's Island is showing a high degree of recklessness.
Yeah, he's guilty. If you went there, you're guilty.
Well,
I'm sorry. Why are you there?
Again, it's only a rumor, and it may be possible that people have gone to Jeff Epstein's Island to actually talk business with Jeff Epstein, and they just sort of, it's a very beautiful place. I've looked at it in Google Earth, and they may have swum in the pool and worked on their tan on the deck. It's certainly a very private place. We don't know that everybody who went there availed themselves of the young girls. But it certainly would be very foolish for somebody to go down there and do that. But again, I stress this is only a rumor. But in the end, it doesn't matter how Donald Trump was turned What's important is he's been turned, and he's now a creature of the deep state. And that means we are all in serious, serious trouble.
Yeah, it sucks. It just sucks. I like Putin. I hate to say it. I think Putin's an honorable statesman, and I can appreciate him standing up to the corruption of the United States government and their allies. Hate to say that. That's what it is. Hopefully he'll have enough resistance to continue to allow the people of the earth to see who the real villains are, and it's us and our allies.
No, it's the oligarchs. It's the money junkies. It always has been. That's the whole point of my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. It's the money junkies who are corrupting our planet.
Yeah, it's so sad that's what we're in. This is a state. We need the people to stand up, though. The only way it's going to be stopped is if the people stand up and say, no, we're not going to believe that crap anymore. Okay. We've believed it for too long, and we don't believe it anymore. And it's time to put some people in jail, and we need to have some Nuremberg trials. It's what we need right now.
I absolutely agree with you. Unfortunately, while this current government remains in power, they will never eat their own. But following a Soviet Union-style collapse or following losing World War III, I'm certainly going to want tickets to the resulting trials.
Me too. Hey, Mike, thank you a bunch for all your work, and let's hope something good can turn out of something. Let's hope that someone can come up with a video that proves that the United States is quite evil.
I don't think you need a video. The United States is seen as evil by pretty much the rest of the planet, except, of course, for Israel, which sees us as their slave.
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, Israel, the United States. Even, Britain left. Brexit left the UK, but like England and stuff, I don't know. It's all corrupted.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Alex, going to let you go. We're going to move over to Frank in London. Frank, thank you for being patient. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I think, first of all, I know you've heard of a buffoon we have over here in London by the name of Boris Johnson.
Yes.
This guy, I think there should be a subject created called buffoonology in honor of this man, because this guy, it's not just that he's a buffoon, he's a dangerous buffoon. And that's regard to his latest statement. Not only that, he proudly said that we supply Saudi Arabia with ammunition. I mean, these people, the guy is a complete clown, but a dangerous one. A buffoon, a clown could be a smart person, but Boris Johnson is a complete buffoon. I don't know if he feels that he's fading into political irrelevance. I don't know, but he's absolutely, I think he should be put in a straitjacket.
Well, he's not irrelevant. He's currently the foreign minister, if I understand correctly, and he's out there talking about literally ignoring the parliamentary vote against British involvement in Syria. And, the British government has never recovered from the lies that got them into Iraq, the dodgy dossier and the Downing Street memo and all the rest of it. And here we are going again. We're going to send the British military into Syria on the basis of this absolutely ridiculous claim that Assad gassed his own people at Idlib. Because the story just doesn't make sense. And they've tried it before, 2013, 2014, and it was a lie. It was exposed as a lie by the United Nations.
Yep, and he intends to do it now without the consent of the British public.
Yeah, well, that's... I have a recommendation. I've had the very great joy of being in London. I was there many, many years ago working with a production company. And I had one day to do a whirlwind tour of London, and I did visit the Tower of London. And I remember that large wooden block with all those dark brown stains on it. It's still there. And I would keep an eye on that. It may become useful in the near future.
Yeah, well, excellent recommendation. Okay, Mike, thanks.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. It's just disgusting when you hear about now with the possibility that he was with Epstein and the Epstein's Island there. This doesn't seem any hope anymore. We're so surrounded by corruption. So here's what I would do. Okay, I would absolutely support. And I know some people will say I'm sounding like a traitor, but I'm not, because I would have a amendment to the Constitution, a temporary amendment to the Constitution, and that's let Vladimir Putin run for president of the United States. Once he's finished with Russia, that he'd run for president of the United States by 2020. And I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't even mind if Bashar al-Assad ran for vice president, because I think both of these men are honorable men. And very courageous men. We don't have anybody at the sword right now in our country. I thought Trump would be one, but he's not. We have nothing but garbage. Absolute garbage.
Well, there's only one flaw with your suggestion, and that is that both Putin and Assad are way too smart to want to take on all of this country's problems. They've got enough of their own problems in Syria and Russia, and I'm sure after they're both out of office, they're going to be thinking seriously about retiring and relaxing for a bit. But right now, the United States is in such a terrible condition. I can't imagine anybody really wanting the job, knowing the problems they're going to deal with, especially after what we've seen the oligarchs do to Donald Trump. And I'm still convinced Donald Trump meant well during the campaign, but as I said, during the campaign and even after his election and inauguration, he went into that White House as dangerously naive about the realities of D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter. Carter was never prepared for what the deep state did to him. He was absolutely blindsided. And Trump is exactly the same.
Well, as far as Putin goes, this guy is almost superhuman. I mean, the guy is well in his 60s. He probably could whip most people behind half his age and less than half his age, and he is a very healthy guy, and he's got a superior mind.
Yeah,
I think he'd be able to do it.
He's the only adult in the pantheon of world leaders right now. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go with Stephen in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, it's going to be real quick, Mike. Back in 2007, I kind of had this all figured out, and there were some people that I told that listened, and they didn't make a ton of money, but they didn't lose their fortunes. And the ones that didn't. And I just want to tell you, right now, I'm feeling a deja vu. I'm feeling the smell in the air of the exact same thing that happened in 2007. So I just wanted to share that with you, and people tell you, except it's going to be a little different this time.
Well, it's different because in 2007 it was the subprime mortgages, and now it's the subprime auto loans. Plus, complicating things is the student loan default rate. It is a mess, and right now our entire economic system is a fairy tale, wishful thinking. After we finish these phone calls, we're going to get back to the economic news.
All right, thank you very much, but I'm just going to let you know that I see all the same things you're seeing, and I just thought I'd pitch in.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch to John in Chicago. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, I know daily, as you know, you watch the news, you have your talking points and things, and what I want you to start inserting into your keep on your watch, you're going to have to watch this alt-right versus the Antifa stuff. We don't need a bunch of young 20-somethings going out to college campuses and killing each other. I mean, you saw what happened in Berkeley, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. They tried to do it again in Auburn last night. I watched like half an hour of that Richard Spencer guy. That guy couldn't inspire a starving dog to eat after a tornado. That guy, he's foul-mouthed. His conjecture is horrible. He's not inspiring anybody. But the fact that we have these young 20-somethings that show up at these states, they're just like Black Lives Matter, and then they get fisticuffs or they get violent. Who did 9/11? If all these people want to direct their anger at something, direct it at who did 9/11. Is Trump doing anything about who did 9/11? All the wars are because of 9/11. Wesley Clark and everything. 9/11 was the catalyst to kick off all these wars. And all these young 20-somethings don't know any better. So for them to get bussed in and then start fisticuffing or throwing M80s at each other over domestic ideologies, this is only going to increase the police state. And God forbid one moron brings a gun to one of these riots, we're all going to lose our Second Amendment.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what is the real agenda. I mean, certainly earlier in the week at Berkeley, the Antifa demonstrators were screaming about Donald Trump's tax returns. And frankly, I'm much more interested in Hillary Clinton's deleted emails than I am in Donald Trump's tax returns. And it's almost like they're being paid to cause violence, but they're running out of reasons to do so because Donald Trump is now going along with the New World Order globalist neocon agenda. And probably they're screaming about his tax returns because they can't think of anything else.
Well, and if these alt-right Trump supporters don't know any better that Trump is going in lockstep, what good are they doing?
I'm still trying to figure that one out. John, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We've got to do station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And we're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines for a while because I got some news. Gaither in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, buddy. That just clicked. Anyway, Mike, I'm a man of solutions, and I really believe that we can think our way out of this. I believe. Hello? Are you still there?
Yes, you're on the air.
All right. Well, it's beeping real loud. Anyway, I'm a man of solutions. Let's purge. Everybody get rid of all the things in your storage sheds. Give it to people who need it. And we can start a revolution just by everybody helping each other out. Everybody, I know for a fact that everybody's got a storage shed or a giant room full of stuff you haven't used in years. And that people can use right now to even start a business, start different things. Let's help ourselves. Let's quit looking at the big plan and look at the little plan. Let's beat each other. Let's help each other. And right now, we can do this. We can do this, people. I mean, Mike, you agree with this or not?
Absolutely, I agree with it. And Claire and I certainly do the same thing. Things that we no longer need, we donate to one of the 2 programs we're involved in, which is not only a food program, but a clothing program, shoe program, whatever. And every once in a while, we'll clean things out, and we'll take it all down. We'll say, just find people who need it. And it all goes. There's huge demand out there. But we should be learning how to take care of each other for another reason. We have been encouraged to become totally and completely dependent on the corporate media supply chain. And in the event of war or an economic crash, that supply chain is going to fail. And right now is when we all need to be rebuilding our sense of community with our neighbors, our friends. Don't do, that social interaction on Facebook. Those people are way too far away to actually be of any use in the event of an emergency. You need to start talking with your neighbors face-to-face in the real world, build those relationships, because that's how you're going to get through the coming hard times, is by learning how to provide for yourself and to form these little neighborhood networks where people of certain skills can take care of things like plumbing and other certain skills. You can share child care or anything like that, but it's absolutely essential that you do that. And,
Well, you know as well as I do, it seems like, I'm a simple man. I'm a carpenter. A master carpenter, been 35 years. But us carpenters, us plumbers, and us electricians, we didn't mess this up. It's all these educated people at these universities. No hard feelings, man. We sat back and we applauded these people, and for years. And you know what? They are the culprits of all this problem. There are not. I do not know of any great men right now that you can publicize. That's just a regular dude. Well, why is that? No, there's plenty of regular dudes that's great.
Well, you're still on the air here. There's an old saying that all of humanity breaks down into 4 categories: makers, takers, breakers, and fakers. And people like you, carpenters and farmers, you're the makers. Takers, well, that's, the bankers and the tax people. The breakers, that's the war machine. And then the fakers are the ones who rule us all through their fakery, whether it's religious leaders and their stories about the imaginary playmate in the sky, or the politicians who campaign on promises of peace and then take you into war. And by the way, we put up a little video clip on whatreallyhappened.com earlier in the week of one of Woodrow Wilson's campaign speeches in which he was promising to keep Americans out of Europe's war. And, of course, once he was president, he helped set up that hoax around the Lusitania, and we got marched off to war again.
Well, yeah, that was the Jewish influence, but we do know, one thing, Mike, you can do is let these people know we can do it in the micro. I mean, we're scared to death. What can we do about Washington? Nothing. But we can look right next door and help those right next door.
Yes, we can,
and, you know what?
and we should.
That hurts Washington more than anything you can imagine. Most people don't realize that. By us helping each other, it kills the Washington, the whole deal.
Well, it's not just a threat to Washington, it's a threat to the corporate culture, because the corporate culture wants to keep us dependent on whatever it is they're selling in the store. Even if it's toxic and harmful and dangerous, they want us being forced to buy their products so that they get our money. It's like the CEO of Nestle saying access to drinking water is not a natural right, and it should be commoditized. Next, it'll be air. If you don't pay your air bill, they epoxy over your mouth and nose, let you suffocate.
One little thing I am doing in my neighborhood is I have some black neighbors, and they're anti-gun, and I'm taking their children for 2 hours a week. I start them with crossbows, and they're gonna. I got them to where they're now not afraid of guns. What we need to do is teach everybody that it's okay to be an American.
I agree.
And it's their time. And it's just everybody has to put out some effort. We can do it at home, people. Don't sit around and wait for the government to fix this. Come on, we got to do it. All right, thank you, Mike. I'm sorry I'm venting, but I love you, Mike. You have a good day.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. One of the disservices that has been done to the American people by TV shows, movies, even comic books, is this idea that somewhere out there, there's a savior who is going to come and make things okay. That if you just sit there calmly and you don't do anything, sooner or later the Lone Ranger's going to ride over that hill and take care of the evil people, or Batman's going to show up, or Klaatu is going to come on down, and boy, we sure need him now. But of course, it's all fiction. And what it does is it encourages people to not take action for themselves, to correct the obvious wrongs in the world. But now's the time to do that. And what Gaither here said is a perfect way to do it. Start learning to be independent of corporate supply chains. Start learning how to cooperate with your friends and neighbors. Build a sense of community in your neighborhood. And because that's what's going to get you through this. Nobody's going to be able to survive the coming chaos in this country following an economic collapse or being defeated in World War III. Nobody's going to survive it on their own. You're not going to be able to do it solo. Now is the time to start building those relationships. Learning who you can help, how you can help them, how they can help you. And another disservice that's done to the American people are all these commercial charities that you see on TV where you send in a check and then you sit back thinking that you've done all you need to do to make the society better. And look at how many of those charities turn out to be complete frauds. One of the reasons Claire and I are directly involved in the programs we're involved with here on the island of Oahu is we know that 100% of the money and effort actually reaches the people who are in need. And it, too, is a community effort. It's organized by the church where Claire's the choir mistress and by one other church that we have a good relationship with. And it's just people in the neighborhood, people in the congregation coming together to do something for the homeless and hungry who are out there. And nobody gets paid for it. But we know that 100% of the effort reaches the people that it needs to get to. All right. Now then, getting on back to the economic news here. Story coming on out, pension fund crisis. trillions will not be paid on out. That is the scale of the shortfall in the pension funds. And all of that goes back to that 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown. Because when these mortgage bundles started being put together, they were a hot item on Wall Street, and Wall Street's pet rating agencies all rated them AAA. Now, pension funds, because their clientele are senior citizens who don't have the luxury of time to rebuild their lives following an economic loss. Pension funds are restrained by law. They can only invest in AAA-rated securities. And the Wall Street rating firms rated these mortgage bundles AAA. Except for one agency, Egan-Jones, which was then attacked by the Securities and Exchange Commission for their heresy. And then, of course, the mortgage-backed security fraud imploded. The pensions were defunded. And because bankers and financial people are demigods in our society, nobody had the spine to stand up and say, Wall Street created this mess. Instead, we start hearing about how people are living too long and they're retiring too early and they're really expecting too much from these pension funds they've paid into over their lives. And now there's literally trillions in shortfalls, pension funds, money that is supposed to be paid out to retirees, and it just isn't there any longer. Social Security is in trouble. President Bill Clinton plundered Social Security for the cash buildup that had been created for the surge in retirements in the baby boomers. And he simply grabbed that money, moved it over to the general ledger, and spent it as general revenues. They called it a loan. The money was replaced with special Treasury bonds, but the government can't redeem those bonds. It's bad paper. If you really think about it, the U.S. government is already in a state of default. And they defaulted on you, the American worker. Because you can't fight back. They don't dare default on the Federal Reserve. They don't dare default on foreign debt. The American worker, what are they going to do? They've already stopped working. And that's how we got into this mess. And it all goes back to that Ponzi scheme called private central banking. Now, a story coming out of IntelliHub, Goldman Sachs is claiming that propping up the economy is great. Sure, we can just keep on going forever, printing up more money and creating it out of thin air. Yeah, we know how well that worked out for Zimbabwe. They reached the point where they literally had paper notes that said $100 trillion on them. And they were actually worth about 12 cents U.S. And that's where we're headed. They're trying to hide the real inflation, the official U.S. government calculation of inflation, which is as trustworthy as the U.S. government's calculation for unemployment, ignores food and fuel, which is where inflation really shows up the most. The really alarming thing is that some years ago, the Federal Reserve stopped publishing a figure called the M3 aggregate. And it was a single number, and it was simply the total volume of currency in circulation, and it was an absolutely accurate measure of inflation. And they stopped publishing it. You people don't need to know what's going on here. Just sit back and trust that it'll all work out in the end for us. But we're hideously in debt. We're borrowing more for all of these wars. And that is another reason why I foresee a Soviet Union-style collapse hitting Washington, D.C. Because the Soviet Union, responding to American aggression, such as the Star Wars initiative, bankrupted itself on their weapons. And now the United States is doing exactly the same thing. When you count up weapons development, weapons procurement, paying for the actual ongoing wars, maintaining all the bases in the Pentagon, and veterans and retirement benefits, that's almost 50% of the gross domestic product. Can you imagine what would happen to our nation's economy if that money started to be put back into building new factories, restoring our infrastructure? Right now, the wealth differential, the wealth inequality in this country is so severe. That's why it's breaking down. We were down at the mall looking at the Easter sales. Every holiday now is an occasion for trying to push more product on the American people. And we were looking at the mall, and a lot of people were walking around, chatting with friends and everything, and hardly anybody was buying. They're out of money, and they don't want to use those credit cards anymore. And even Wall Street is starting to realize the problem is that ordinary people just don't have the money anymore. And so now we have this story that came out of Investment Watch blog. The second largest U.S. brokerage house is chasing after Chinese investors. They want to take U.S. properties here and sell them to people in China. Because despite all the news you've heard about the Chinese economy being in trouble, and it is, the Chinese people still have money. They can buy houses. Americans can't. Now, the reason China's economy is in trouble is because they're a major manufacturing, exporting country. Yes, they make really cheap, shoddy products if that's what the American importers ask for, the big box stores. China can make really cool things. This iPhone was made in China. I don't think there's an American company that can actually make something like that. But China's primary customer for its exported products was the United States of America. And as Americans are plundered for their money to pay for the wars and to keep the money junkies happy, we're buying less and less of their products. This is an iPhone 5. I don't plan on upgrading to the iPhone 6 or 7 until I absolutely have to. And so China's economy, that portion of it dependent on Americans buying their products, is in serious trouble, and it's had a domino effect. All righty. Apparently, Tony Blair is getting ready to team up with Farron, the Liberal Democrat leader, Tim Farron, crossing party lines. Blair is joining forces with the Liberal Democrats to find some way to halt the Brexit. Tony Blair is telling the British voters to back any candidate that opposes Brexit. Remember, Theresa May has called a snap election for this summer. And both sides are campaigning to try and get a parliament that is going to go along with the will of the British people. And, of course, the Remain camp wants to try and get Parliament loaded up with parliamentarians who will vote to end Brexit. And remember how much they cheated during the Brexit election, the referendum. They're going to do the same thing this summer. Now, over in France, Marine Le Pen is out there campaigning and wants to be the next president of the French Republic, is already dealing with massive election fraud. And she made a comment standing on a stage in front of the flag of France saying, I want to be the president of the French Republic. I don't want to be the European Commission president. And then she went on to say the European Union has done a lot of harm to her country. And Brussels is raging at her for refusing to have the flag of the European Union on the stage with her. Now, last week we were talking about how Hungary and Poland are willing to risk and endure European Union sanctions rather than be forced to take more refugees. The Czech Republic has just stepped up with them. That's how much harm the refugee program has caused to these European countries. And it is amazing to see how all of these various governments have been taken over by the globalists, who are just pushing for this blurring of all humanity and the dropping of borders in a single one world government and a single one world private central bank, no matter how much harm it brings to their own population. They're willing to erase their own culture, their own heritage, their own history. Because they dream of a one world government. and of the day their particular bottom sits on that golden throne of planet Earth. I'm thinking most of these people are really certifiable. It would be nice if there really was a machine that you could hook up to somebody, push a button, and the machine says, yeah, these people are mentally ill. All right, we've got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, last week, there was an incident in New York where there was this New York State judge, Sheila Abdus Salam, and she was found floating in the Hudson River and immediately was declared, well, suicide, terrible, we don't know why she would do something like that, but obviously that's what it is. And the only thing they had about it was that 2 years, her brother and mother both committed suicide around Easter 2 years apart from each other, and they said, well, she's just maintaining a family tradition. Apparently, the NYPD now has reason to pull back on that suicide claim, that initial suicide claim, and they're treating it as a suspicious death. So there may have been an assassination. A lot of wet work going on here. Now, over in Maryland, Governor Hogan has signed into law Senate Bill 217, and Senate Bill 217 modifies the state's rape law, removing the requirement that victims need to prove they resisted sex. And on the face of it, it sounds like kind of a common sense situation, but looking back at the 1990s rape hysteria, we saw a huge number of cases where women who had morning after regrets, they felt guilty about having had sex even though they consented to it, or they consented to sex and then faced criticism from friends and family, would often cry rape where none had occurred. There was one gentleman, Gary Dotzen, went to prison for 6 years because the woman who accused him, and they hadn't even been together, he'd never even met her, but the woman who accused him was having consensual sex with her boyfriend, didn't want her parents to realize that she was sexually active, and said, oh, I was raped, and that's the guy who did it. So the requirement to demonstrate resistance was done to protect men from false accusations of rape. And again, looking back in the 1990s, rape was the second most common falsely reported crime because of all the rape hysteria in the media. So I'm not sure that this is really a good idea. And part of the problem is, yes, no means no. But yes has to mean yes. And there is a problem that you need to deal with, that women will say yes at one point in time, regret it, feel guilty about it, and then say, well, I'm not guilty of sex, I was raped. So, this is a very bizarre story in the world of political correctness, coming out of governmentslaves.info. Black students are now condemning truth as an invention of white people, which sounds bizarre. Okay, who invented the lies then? And it's another artifact of what's being called the post-truth world, where they're actually trying to sell the idea that facts and reality aren't really relevant anymore, that your perceptions and beliefs are all that matter. And if they can manipulate your perceptions and belief, then they can manipulate you. And those people who are interested in actually looking at the truth are a bunch of wild-eyed, tinfoil hat, coop, wingnut conspiracy wackos who should be shunned by all right-thinking people here. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers. A story coming out of Blacklisted News. There are some leaked documents that are showing Google contractors suppressing the independent media, and Google has now admitted, yes, they have been doing this. And they do it through the suppression of search results. People who are looking for certain things, It won't show up in the search algorithm. The algorithm is deciding for you what you're going to see. We were talking just yesterday about how somebody had gone and looked at search results for Hillary Clinton on Google, Yahoo, and Bing, and Google was obviously filtering. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Yesterday we were talking about this new, almost undetectable phishing attack that is spreading all over the world, in which you think you are clicking on the domain name of a known and trusted site, and you get taken to a website that looks like the site you think you're on, which then proceeds to try and infiltrate your machine and acquire various information. And the way it works is the fake domains are actually created using what are called Unicode characters that create foreign alphabet letters that look almost identical to the English language. And at a casual glance, you think you're looking at, for example, apple.com. And so the domains are registered and the phishing attack is put on out, and it's very, very hard to detect. Now, the good news is somebody has already come on out with an add-on for the Chrome browser called IDN Safe, and I've already downloaded and installed it. And IDN Safe blocks these internationalized domain names, Punycode domains. And it does have a whitelist, so if there's something that really actually does have Unicode characters that you need to get to and you know it's safe, you can whitelist them. And it's for Chrome, but you can use it on Opera because there is a mechanism in Opera where you can download these Chrome plugins, and I assume that it will be available for other browsers as well very, very quickly. So there's some good news on that front. Homeland Security is warning of BrickerBot malware that destroys unsecured Internet-connected devices. So you'd better go on out and buy some new security software for your Internet of Things. Actually, I have a better solution. Don't buy Internet of Things devices. Do you really need them? It's a fad. It's another fad. You don't need a coffee maker that plugs into the Internet. And already it's turning out to be a major, major, major headache. Now, Bose Corporation, which is famous for its audio products, very expensive ones, they're now facing a lawsuit because it turns out their latest wireless headphone it can be spied on. And Bose actually spies on its wireless headphone customers by using an app that tracks the music, podcasts, and other audio they listen to and sells the information without permission to the marketing companies. So it's just really getting out there, and it's absurd. Good reason not to have wireless headphones. And there's another reason not to have wireless anything, and I'm not talking about the electronic noise and its adverse health effects. If you're using, for example, a wireless keyboard and a wireless mouse, hackers nearby with the appropriate equipment can see what you're typing, including passwords to your bank account. And so it's all corded mice and keyboards here. WikiLeaks is continuing to release information from Vault 7 and confirming that the CIA tools are able to infiltrate MacBooks and iPhones. And they're everywhere. They're spying on everybody. It's like they think there's no more Fourth Amendment. Now, if you have a hot point product like a cooker or washer or oven, do not arrange a repair by visiting the company's site. Netcraft says that the appliance vendor's website is foisting nastyware onto visitors. And that's becoming a problem, too, where real, legitimate websites are being compromised to plant malware on your computer. It is totally and completely out of control. And another reason to think all this talk about the NSA's being able to spy on everybody is a bluff to scare us into silence, and it has not worked, I might add, is they're unable to find all these cyber criminals. The ransomware writers, not able to do it. Now, we were talking the other day about how Microsoft has arbitrarily declared that they're going to stop patches and updates on Windows 7 and Windows 8 on some of the newer CPU chips, because if you've got the money to afford a new CPU chip, you've got the money to buy Windows 10. And apparently, over at the Register in Great Britain, there's a developer that says he's already found a way to get around the block. And he hopes to be publishing it as soon as it's done testing. And if you have this, and you have one of the newer processors, you can keep your Windows 7, Windows 8, and still get the security updates. If you like your Windows 7, you can keep your Windows 7. Now, the other day, actually it was longer ago than that, it was about, I think, a month or so. And we were talking about this doll in Germany called the My Friend Kayla. And researchers discovered the dolls were recording the children playing with it and sending this information out to a third party specializing in voice recognition for police. And Germany outlawed the dolls. Germany told the parents to get rid of the toys out of concern that pedophiles would hack on in to these dolls and find out when the children would be vulnerable. And Germany is now backing it up. If you are caught with a My Friend Kayla doll now, it is a $26,500 fine. So, there's been a study about people who use their cell phones while driving. And yes, it is a dumb thing to do. Just a 2-second distraction while you are driving increases your risk of a collision or an accident by 20%. It is simply not worth it. Here in Hawaii, it's a $300 fine if you're caught using your cell phone while driving. But apparently using sensors and other equipment, they did a survey, and they discovered 88% of drivers are using the phones. And that really is ridiculous. Now, I want to take a little time out here, call this consumer protection. If you are a prepper, one of the things you really ought to have is a good shortwave radio. And when I was younger, I built a Heathkit shortwave radio, and because we had to meet a weight limit when we were brought here to Hawaii, I gave the shortwave away, and I've always regretted it. It was a wonderful, wonderful machine, along with the pride of having built it myself by hand. So shortly before the Radio Shack at the bottom of the hill closed, they were having a half-price off sale. And I decided I was going to get a new shortwave radio in order to be able to hear what other countries are saying without it being filtered through America's corporate media and so forth. So I went on down, and even though I'm skeptical of Radio Shack, there really wasn't any place else. Best Buy doesn't carry shortwave radios. And so I went down to Radio Shack, and there was one radio that they had, one model, basically, and it was a Grundig. And I said, okay, Grundig is a well-respected name. Anybody who knows radio knows Grundig has a very great reputation for televisions and radios and its shortwaves. I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather had a Grundig shortwave radio, and so I got it. And mostly I've had here in the office playing the local FM music station, keep myself company when I'm working, and I decided that I was going to go on out and try and hear the voice of Korea and sort of get direct from North Korea what is going on, which is why I was able to tell that caller earlier in the show that North Korea is out there saying their weapons are being built to deter an invasion by the United States, because they've been invaded by the United States before, and it was a really unpleasant affair. And so I'm trying to tune to the frequency. I can't find the voice of Korea. I figure, okay, maybe the ionosphere is messed up, the sun is active or everything. And I'm going around the dial, and I decide as a simple test to tune into the WWV. Now, WWV are transmitters that operate on 5, 10, 15, and 20 megahertz, and they broadcast a time signal from the atomic clocks. These are run by the U.S. government. And it's a very accurate time reference, and it's used, well, we certainly used it up at the Table Mountain Observatory to set all of our clocks for the clock drives on the telescopes. And it's important for ships to be able to get the exact time because they need that in the pre-GPS days to calculate their longitude. So I couldn't even hear those, and I'm just spinning around the dial. And I finally hit a WWV station and time signal, and it is more than a megahertz away from the displayed frequency on the radio. So I do a web search, and I find out two things. One, these particular Grundigs have that problem, and there is no way to fix it. Two, Grundig was actually acquired by another company back in 2007. And we've seen a lot of that, where somebody will have built a fabulous reputation for quality products, and somebody comes on in and they buy it knowing the name is going to sell product, and they just slap the name on really cheaply made products. Because let's be honest, a shortwave radio that you cannot actually tune to a designated frequency is really not of any use whatsoever. And so I'm probably going to go on listening to FM music on this thing, but I'm going to have to get another shortwave radio. I don't have a huge amounts of it. I'd love one of those big communication receivers the hams have, but those go for huge, huge amounts of money. But it's just something to keep in mind. The brand names often don't represent the brand after a while, after an acquisition. When Carly Fiorina took over Hewlett-Packard, it had an excellent brand reputation. And then she figured, well, we'll just value engineer everything and people will buy it because it's Hewlett-Packard. And when Claire and I started our production company, we were buying all this Hewlett-Packard equipment because I'd had a positive memory of Hewlett-Packard from my days with JPL and NASA. I had wonderful HP calculators, and all the stuff we bought was junk, was locking up, was falling apart. The CD-ROM burners, which were being manufactured in Hungary, and had the HP name slapped on them, they were burning out after just 2 weeks. And we came close to losing the company just on the fact that everything was breaking down, and we came dangerously close to missing a deadline, at which point you get sued and you stop being the business that you are in. So you've got to be very careful, and that's another reason why I think people like retail. If they've got the money, they're going to go into the store because they want to actually touch the object. And in hindsight, I should have turned on this radio and tuned to WWV to make sure the frequency worked. But how can you even imagine a company putting out a radio where the dial is like a whole megahertz off of what the real frequency is? So you've got to be very, very careful. But you should have a good shortwave radio here. All right, we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for the rest of the show. Alan in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. I just wanted to comment, you talking always about your website coming under attack, and it's definitely a unique experience going to your site. Last night, I have an Android tablet, and when I went there, it just was sputtering. It was having such a hard time to log on to it, and when it finally got on, I've seen occasionally through Chrome, you'll see one or two, a bar will come up and say, pop-ups blocked. It said 25 pop-ups blocked. And
okay. I would strongly suggest you check your Android for malware, hijackware. There's a lot of browser hijackers out on Android right now because I certainly do not have that many pop-ups. There are 3 pop-unders. There are no pop-overs.
Right, and this was, I don't know, because I've had it before where I've gone on your site and actually it'll take you somewhere or have a denial of service. This one, I believe you're right. I think it's malware, something. Is it on somewhere somebody's putting that on to try to block people from getting on? Because I got on and I was able to scroll down, but when I came back up, it would, boom, it would try to hit me again with 25 pop-ups.
Yeah, that sounds like you've got a browser hijacker because I am now paying for a service, an outside service, that scans web servers for malware. And they scan whatreallyhappened.com 3 times every day, and I get the reports that my site is clean. Because I do spend a lot of time trying to keep this stuff from going on. And yes, at points in the past, my site has been broken into and malware was planted there, and I've taken steps to make sure that that's not going to happen again. But it's open season on computer users around the world. And they're not going to stop because certainly the government isn't giving them any incentive to stop doing what they're doing. They're acting completely with impunity. I remember one time when my site was really being attacked and somebody was trying to plant child porn on it. And I did the proper legal thing. I called the FBI and I said, this is going on, and the agent who was assigned to the case, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get this person in trouble, literally told me off the record to my face that the U.S. attorney had instructed the FBI, hacker attacks on Patriot websites were not to be investigated. So, I mean, that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I've had another friend of mine. He has a business, and his website, it did direct you to some porn sites. And I know that one time GCN, a couple of years ago, just on the call-in line, it directed it over to some like porn call-in site. I do know that the Patriot sites are always under attack, and I was just curious because I know every time you hit on a subject they don't like, I mean, they really blast your site, Mike.
Yeah, they do, and I've sort of become a little bit of a computer security expert. But again, the advantage is all on their side. The network is set up to allow them to be able to hide. Anytime there's been a suggestion of guaranteed authoritative backtrace to a source from which this is coming, there's all these industry spokesmen who stand up and say, "Oh no, it's costing too much. It's going to overload the net, and you know, your best solution is to go out and buy more security software."
Well, Mike, it would be like if your house continually got broken into and somebody would say, yes, because you have a basement window that's continually open. That's what they do with these computers, I guess. They leave a back door for the NSA or somebody.
Yeah, and the hackers and criminals will find it. And again, what we're getting from WikiLeaks Vault 7 document release is the CIA has a parallel program to the NSA. We've got two different groups doing the exact same job. And they're backdooring everything, and the criminals eventually will find all of this stuff and use it.
Well, Mike, I just wanted to say hi to you again and just run that by you, and have a great day, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And yeah, right now there's a major epidemic of browser hijackers that are hitting the Android platforms. So you got to be very, very careful. You've got to know what to look for, and you know, it does make life more miserable for all of us on these devices. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And in fairness, I do have to acknowledge that Hewlett-Packard has started to get their quality back in the post-Carly Fiorina years. Most of the equipment I've seen lately seems a little bit better. And I'm certainly in love with my HP 50G graphing calculator, which I got when my HP 28C finally wore out, and I can't complain about that because I had that calculator for very, very, very long time, and I greatly enjoyed it. They're fun. In addition to solving your problems, they're a lot of fun, and I figured it was fair to just point that out. Now then, getting on back to the serious news here, story coming out from Investment Watch blog, the new FDA commissioner, and we know how corrupt they've already been up to this point, but the current nominee for FDA commissioner is Scott Gottlieb, and apparently his agenda is speeding up the already recklessly too fast drug approval process. And it is a disaster given the fact that FDA-approved medical drugs already kill at least 106,000 Americans every single year. This is according to the Journal of the American Medical Association, July 26, 2000. And a lot of people are very concerned because he does have ties to the pharmaceutical industry. When he was at the FDA before, and he left in 2007. And he's currently a member of the Product Investment Board for drug giant GlaxoSmithKline, a member of the Board of Directors for Medavante, Gredalis, and Glytech. And so anybody who thinks the FDA under this guy is going to be looking out for what is healthy for you is dreaming. You must be high. But if you're going to be high, remember you have to buy the legalized, prescribed opiates. None of that street stuff out there. Here's a very interesting story. It's from Natural News, and it's talking about fake meat from a company called Impossible Foods. It's a Silicon Valley startup, and it's been invested in financially by Google and Bill Gates. And what they're trying to do is create a synthetic mush that will pass for meat to you, the American consumer. And unfortunately, I mean, their goal is to make it look, smell, and taste like real meat. But it's filled with genetically modified organisms, monosodium glutamate, all kinds of other toxins. It's Soylent Red is what it is. And it's another reminder that between Fukushima and the Deepwater Horizon disaster destroying much of the Pacific fisheries, there actually isn't enough natural, organic, safe food for the human population. And that's why they're trying to come up with all of these artificial products that are made up out of whatever they can find around in the ground. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please make a point of taking what you learn here and sharing it on your social media, your friends and your family. We are not out of danger yet of World War III, and it's going to take a united American people to try and stop this before we all face a horrible outcome. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.